Hi, my name is Constantine Sypsomos. I am a firefighter EMT in New Jersey.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to a new season of Shared Stories of Medicine. I think this episode is going to be interesting because um, most people hear firefighter and they think, Chicago fire, a bunch of, jacked people sliding down a pole, responding to a fire, putting it out with water. And they don't realize how much more there is to the job, how much more training there is to the job, and quite honestly, how they tie into other emergency medical services. They provide an essential service that does include medical training. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, not only just in this country, but around the world, because I know it widely varies depending on where you do it, not just stateside, but also around the world. So we can get a little bit of perspective as to how the job itself, being a firefighter, ties into medicine, because I think not many people realize it unless you work in emergency medical services or emergency services in general. So thank you for joining me, Con. I appreciate you being here. Feel free to weigh in. Let everybody know how long you've been a firefighter for and what else you do aside from putting out fires.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having me. It's really cool to be here.
Sure.
So I've been in the fire department since 1997. Joined up, I was 14 years old, and I got hired career in 2007. And I've been doing EMS since the year 2000. And I've been doing that ever since.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you work both as a firefighter and also in EMS. So
Correct.
okay. And this is not at the same job. These are at two separate jobs. One's
No,
in
actually
EMS.
three.
Oh, okay.
Actually, three. Yeah. So I work full time as a firefighter in Deptford Township in Gloucester County, New Jersey,
Mhm.
and I'm a EMT with Gloucester County EMS. We are the first county-based system in the state of New Jersey, and I also work as an EMT for Cooper EMS in the city of Camden.
I gotcha. Yeah. I asked if it was the same department just because I know a lot of cities are different. And here in Philadelphia, the firefighters are also certified as EMTs, and they can, in fact, pick up shifts on the ambulance if there's a shortage. I know they, for a long time, would typically run two paramedics on an ambulance, but in instances of, employee shortage or call outs or anything like that, they could have a firefighter jump on the ambulance. So I know, like I said, I know it varies everywhere. So I wasn't sure if your firefighter job also included an ambulance as well.
It does not. We do respond to medical calls, as most fire departments do around the area. Some departments do have, fire-based EMS services where they do both firefighting and EMS. But a lot of times it's combination where, you run medical calls and you assist EMS, or EMS will assist the fire department. But at the end of the day, we're all under the same roof and the same umbrella, and we have to work together.
Yeah.
A lot of cross training involved.
And that's real. The first episode of the first season included Astro, who's a paramedic, and I thought for the first episode of the second season with you, we could get another angle of emergency services and how firefighting ties in. So, what initially got you interested in becoming a firefighter? You started really young, at 14 years old. My mind was focused on so many things aside from putting out fires and saving people. So that's an interesting take.
So, funny story. I grew up right across the street from the firehouse, and ironically, that's one of the firehouses I actually work in today. And my parents still live right across the street from that station.
That's awesome.
So I would always see the trucks go in and out, and I always thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I was a little kid, and I'd always watch them back in, pull the trucks out and go out on calls. And when I was 14, I found out that I guess they had like a junior apprenticeship program. Nowadays, they call it Explorer program, but when I joined, they didn't have that. It was called an apprenticeship. So I went over and I signed up, and been there ever since. So I was never a big sports kid growing up, that's for sure. The
Right.
guys I work with will tell you that. I'm not a sports guy whatsoever. So it was kind of funny. My mom and dad, my mom actually, they support me very much. However, my mom goes, "You won't last. You don't like doing anything. You won't last over there." And here I am making a career out of it.
It's
So
physical. It's
yeah.
physical.
So I joined. I made a lot of friends, made a lot of contacts. I just enjoyed it.
Sorry to cut you off. This is interesting because a lot of times in my experience, my interactions, somewhere in the person's lineage or like somewhere in their family tree, there was somebody who was a firefighter. I always run into these people our age or younger that are, oh, I started doing this when I was 14 because my grandfather did it, my grandmother did it, my grandparents, my parents, whoever. So you didn't have anybody before you. You were the first one coming in at 14.
So actually, I did. My father was a volunteer before me. And then when I joined up at 14, he actually rejoined for some time. Kind of, I guess I was a little bit shy and nervous. So he was kind of
Sure,
like, "Hey,
yeah.
I'll go over with you," and get back into it. And that's how it went down.
Yeah, I'm always
But other than
interested.
that, I'm the only one in the family.
I feel like there's always somebody in the family that has done it, or I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Firefighting is like this very close knit group of people that are always, it's generational. They're my grandfather did it, his father did it, his father's father did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's always like a long line of firefighters in some of these diehard families. So that's pretty cool. But you became a firefighter at 14. That kind of sparked your interest. You said, "Okay, I can make a career out of this. I actually really like doing this." What was the schooling afterwards? I imagine you have to get certified and you have to train and you have to learn things.
So no doubt the training never stops for any kind of fire, EMS, police, emergency services. The training is key. It's imperative. It's very important. So when I started at 14, the first 2 years, I couldn't ride the trucks to calls yet, but you got to look at the equipment and learn. The
Sure.
senior firefighters would teach you. And then when I was 16, I could go to calls under, supervision, but I couldn't go into burning buildings or anything yet because I wasn't certified, but I could at least go to the calls and start to learn. And then, when you become of age at 18, and you can go to fire school and get all your certifications. So you have a couple of major certifications you really, get early on. And that's, firefighter one. Now it's called it's called Pro Board. And what that means is it's good to, it's the same training can be used anywhere basically in the country.
Sure.
Instead of it being individually state, trained. So that's come a long way. And then I got my EMT when I was 16. So I was pretty young when I got my EMT, and why I got it was for the fire department. I never thought I would make a career out of that because I was full time in EMS before I went to the fire department.
Right.
And some guys in the fire department worked the ambulance in the same town and were kind of like, "Hey, you should do a ride along." I was like, "I'm not really into it." And they're like, "Oh, check it out." And I did. And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I could do this for a little bit." And went and got my EMT, and that's how that started. And then, the training just goes on and on. You have so many different certifications. Sometimes it might be a weekend class. Sometimes it's a college semester. Sometimes it's a week-long class. You can go all over the country to different training companies to train. There's
a lot of
possibilities.
A lot of specialty training is what it sounds like as well. Like there's, you look into a firehouse, and from a perspective of somebody who, obviously I know a bit about the fire service, but from a perspective of somebody who knows nothing about firefighting, firefighters, emergency services, anything like that, they look in and they see 900 different vehicles that are really cool and have different things written on them, and they think, what's the difference? So what are some of the different pieces of apparatus that you have, and why are they there? What role do they play?
So again, it varies department to department, but primarily every fire department has an engine, a pumper. And that is the bread and butter of any fire. That puts the fire out, that carries the water of the fire, has, hand tools and miscellaneous equipment.
Right.
So that's pretty much going to be on every call you respond to, no matter what department you're in. Usually the engine is always there at minimum. Then you have your ladder trucks, and there is a few different types of them. Some have buckets, some do not have buckets. Some are 75 feet, some are 100 feet, some 110 feet. Again, all depends on the nature of the town, on the layout of the town, on
Right.
Your your buildings. It varies. So they have a lot of jobs. The one thing with the ladder companies are they don't carry water, most of them. So what that means is when they pull up, the engine is fighting the fire, and the ladder guys are doing everything else. They're opening windows, they're opening the roof. They're searching for victims, they're searching for fire. They have a really, tough and dangerous job. And then after that, you have your rescue. So your rescue personnel, that's kind of like your toolbox at the fire scene. That basically is the people that can show up and pretty much be assigned any task on the fire ground or the rescue assignment. So if it's a rescue, they're specially trained. But if it's a fire, they could do engine work, ladder work, they could do anything that's needed. If you go in other parts of the country,
they're like the jack of all trades. They show up and they solve the puzzle. If you have somebody, trapped down in a sewer, that's a bad example, but if you have some crazy incident, where somebody falls into a giant piece of machinery that needs to be disassembled or something like that, you would just call the rescue, I guess.
Yeah. So it varies. I can't stress that enough. The big cities utilize rescue services a lot better and a lot more than the suburban areas where I'm at. So when you said about a minute ago about the jack of all trades, the way we operate, where I work is we are the jack of all trades in a sense of we pull up and we could be doing engine work, ladder work, rescue work. We're multi-trained because we don't have specialty companies coming on every call. Where again, a big city, they have the staffing for that they can bring the rescue company and they are specially trained, where we are trained in everything. So again, it varies, and we just have to make the best what we have in front of us, and we make it work and we adapt.
Which truck do you work on? Do you work on all of them, or are you assigned one specific truck?
We rotate, but again, depends where you're at. I personally rotate. So I've done, tours on rescue, tours on ladder, tours on engine.
What are you most interested in?
I like the rescue work. I do. I like rescue. It's different. It's kind of cool.
You get to solve a puzzle. Bit. Yeah, you get to solve a puzzle every time. That is really interesting. And again,
you're like the toolbox. You go, every major incident you go to, pretty much. I was assigned to the rescue for a little bit where I work. When I first got hired, actually, which is kind of a little bit backwards because most departments, you should work your way up to the rescue because that's a lot of training. Yeah. But again, in a suburban department, it doesn't work that way. So I was assigned pretty early on at a young age and, got to do a lot of training and do some rescue work.
What happens when you show up at the firehouse? Do they say, welcome, you're going on the engine? Or, hey, you seem like a ladder, or is it just randomized?
It depends. Some departments do what's called crossing the floor, which means they might have two trucks that they have to run. So they might have an engine and ladder. And depending on the call or where the call is, they might have to take their gear off of one truck and put it on another and take that one. So I've done that too. If there was a fire on our first due, depending on the time of day with our staffing, we might have to take our gear off of one truck and put it on another to go to the call with the other truck.
So that's unique to your department. I mean, you made it obvious it's very different depending on where you go. But what do the neighboring big cities do? What you show up, you're done the academy, you're a firefighter. They say your engine, your ladder.
Usually, and I'm only speaking on experience of friends that work in these big cities, and also just people that I know pretty well that do teaching over there. They basically, get their assignment at the academy when they graduate and say, hey, here's where you're being assigned. Some departments do a 1 year or 6 months, and then you go to a transfer to another company to get the experience. Believe it or not, they actually might look at someone's size and say, hey, you're a really tall, stocky guy. Guess what? You're going to a ladder truck because, they need people like that on a ladder company that are just big and can do a lot of tasks. Where a smaller guy might be assigned to the engine just because they're smaller and they can, maneuver hose easier. And there's a lot of different traits they look at.
That's smart. You want what's best for not only the people that you're saving and the fire that you're putting out, but also for the crew, right? Because you guys have to protect each other. There's a lot of hands at play. On these. You
have to know what everybody's thinking, and we always joke that no matter how much sometimes a guy might upset you or you get frustrated with, all bets are off. When that call goes out and you gotta go to a fire or a major incident, everybody works together no matter what. You can have an argument with a guy the morning of, but guess what? That afternoon, it's like it never even happened. If you get a fire, you do what you got to do, and we work together.
I feel like this plays a part in why every time I walk by a firehouse in Philadelphia, they're always, when they're not on a call, they seem like they're having a blast. Just like, it's like a brotherhood. Like they're hanging out, they're cooking food, they're working out, they're all laughing. They always seem like they're enjoying themselves in their downtime. And I think, well, that probably plays a role in the necessary teamwork, because when you get on that call, you guys can't be, loafing around or mad at each other. You kind of got to work together, like you said, and throw all that out the window. So that's really interesting. And tying this into medicine, because this is shared stories of medicine, people don't realize, you mentioned a lot of different specialties, but when the house is on fire, the apartment building's on fire, people are jumping out of it, the firefighters don't show up after their calendar shoot and just spray the house or the apartment building with water. They actively rescue the people and provide care until a higher level arrives. Is that correct? I mean, I was hoping, because you have so much experience, you could kind of tie in how emergency medical services and firefighters coincide. Like, how do they work with each other?
Okay, so let's start with this. You have a lot of firefighters, and I'm friends with a lot of them. I hear it right from them, that will say they hate EMS, they hate the medical end of it. But at the end of the day, it's a huge part of our job, whether you like it or not. Fire and EMS go together. You pull up to a car accident, that's not a fire, that's a medical issue. You go to a fire and you pull somebody out, they need treatment. You go to a rescue assignment, someone's stuck in a trench, a construction worker, a building collapse. That is a rescue assignment where someone needs to be, quote unquote, rescued. That's a victim, that's a patient. So you have to have that training to be able to treat these victims that are in front of you until the higher medical personnel can get to them, the advanced life support or the BLS, the basic life support. So fire, and EMS have to work together. And again, I hear it all the time. They a lot of fire departments and firefighters, they make fun of EMS, and they call them names, and they're like bullies to them, and they call the ambulance names, and they make jokes, and I'm like, guys, it's part of our job. Like, it's part of a service that we do, and we are. That's something that's changed over time. There's very few fire departments anymore that just go to fires. I mean, very few.
Sure.
Some way or another, if you look at CPR, the new CPR guidelines over the past, 4 to 5 years are pit crew CPR. You need people to rotate out doing chest compressions. Most fire departments go to cardiac arrest calls. Most fire departments go to motor vehicle accidents. Most fire departments go to pedestrians struck by vehicles. And the list goes on and on.
And they
have to work together.
Yeah, it's a very tight collaboration too, because if you show up and there's nobody to be rescued, which is best case scenario, and there's just a house on fire, but then it collapses on you and now you need to be rescued, it's good to have the medical personnel there, or people on your crew of firefighters that have medical training, right? Because you don't want them just dragging you out of the collapsed house and not helping you in the interim. So I think that's important for people to realize, because again, Chicago Fire is probably a horrible example, because Chicago Fire actually has EMS employees on it. But I don't know what's Rescue Me or what. It's not like Rescue Me or
all them shows
Draft or whatever.
Listen, all them shows are nothing but pure entertainment and laughing at what they do wrong and make us look bad, in my opinion.
Right.
It is what it is. That's Hollywood, I guess. There's nothing I can do to change that. But I just laugh at a lot of these shows, and you watch them, and some of the things they do and come up with, and you're like, what? That's not even realistic. There's people that aren't even in the field that could realize they don't do that. It's just funny. But
so without giving specifics on, obviously don't mention any names or anything like that, but can you talk about maybe some of the incidents that you've been on that required rescue operations, or were there any instances where you got to really utilize your across the board skills between the engine, the ladder, and the rescue truck? Are there any like large scale incidents where you were like, hey, this was really useful?
It depends. I've seen a lot on both the fire side and on the EMS side.
I know it's been 2 decades. It's kind of hard to just nitpick one, but
so I actually keep a log of all my interesting calls or out of the ordinary calls, just
Sure.
To look back on. But I will tell you one night I was on the ambulance. We had a guy that went through a fence post, drove his car and through a fence post. He had a 60-foot chain link fence post through him. So
wow.
That's not a normal extrication, and I actually have pictures of that, and I use it when I'm teaching to show people this is reality. This is a rare call, but an impalement does happen. You can't just rip this guy out of a car. You'll kill him.
No.
He'll die instantly. You can't do it. So this rescue operation specifically was a lot of different things. You got a vehicle extrication. You got to get to the patient. Then, the ALS personnel had to stabilize him with, IV access and possibly advanced airway if he was to, stop breathing. And then the rescue, after extricating the doors and cutting away the car, they now have to cut the pipe as best they can.
I was going to ask, did you have to cut it like at his front and his back, or?
So that's what they did. They did a phenomenal job. The rescue and the fire and EMS worked great together. They cut the pipe. So we had to pull him out of the car in a non-traditional way, a non-book way, because you had to get him out and be very delicate. Because again, the guy's got a pipe in him. No other way to put it.
Right.
And we got to the hospital and they were just like, wow, trauma was like, he obviously has to go to surgery and get the rest of the pipe removed, but they couldn't believe it either. Well, the guy's still alive. He lived. Luckily, it just missed anything major. But, at the end of the day, though, that guy's going to remember that forever. And you and the crew, not one person, the entire team made a difference. That's just one small example of the out of the ordinary call where medicine and fire rescue work together, because you need to have that, that patient. You have to be able to push pain medication. You have to be able to do advanced airway maneuver if needed. You have to be able to have IV access. So medics were in the car as they're, cutting to make sure if this guy crashes, they're able to at least do the best they can for the patient.
Yeah. I can't get past the part where you mentioned cutting it and then trying to get him out of the vehicle. I'm picturing like the worst game of Tetris ever, where you're thinking, all right, well, if I turn this way and lift this way, it'll maybe fit in between this space.
And it was interesting because you had to put him on a stretcher on an angle and pad him up with blankets. But that's just some of the things you run into out there that people have no idea like what's really involved.
Here's the sorry to cut you off, but here's the thing that's great about that example is, had the firefighters and the rescue operation not realized how important it was to maintain stabilization and go slow and steady on the extrication, this guy would have been dead probably. If they jostled him around too much or whatever.
In a lot of the trauma classes that EMS and nurses and doctors and and paramedics take or teach, there's a little thing we use, on the scene. Do we stay and play or do we load and go? Well, sometimes you have to load and go because that's just the way it is. Sometimes though, you have to stay for the best outcome of the victim. That was the situation. Was we weren't yanking that guy out and going to the hospital. It wasn't happening. You're going to have that time where someone is entangled in a vehicle crash where, guess what? You might have to go out of the ordinary and call a surgeon to the scene. That's not unheard of. You may have to call a surgeon to the scene and they might have to do a field amputation. Again, few and far between, but the reality is it's there. So, do you save the person's life when they lose a leg, or do they bleed out and die on the scene? Which one, what's the better outcome?
Yeah. And had there not been an understanding of the collaboration necessary, it probably would have been a worse outcome for the guy too. So that's a pretty good example. Now, what are some of the biggest challenges outside of tricky extrications that you face as a firefighter?
The challenges are, I think on the fire side is, staffing. That's we always want more people. and we're
Yeah.
doing more with less. And you talk to anybody around will say, we're doing more with less. We have so many job tasks that have to be done with less people. Budgets, especially now with the COVID and with everything else going on across the country, budget cuts, attrition. They're not replacing when people retire. A lot of departments aren't promoting. They're not keeping the staff at a safe level. They're not keeping the command staff at a level where they can effectively run a scene. They're not maintaining policies. It's getting sloppy. So their challenges we face not on calls. On calls, honestly, most people will tell you that's the easy part. The calls are the easy part. That's the bread and butter. I mean, that's what we signed up for. You go out and you help people.
For
you
sure.
Go, whatever the call is, and listen, we do a lot of shoe runs, which we call them shoe runs. They're the minor calls, a wire down, or somebody smells something in their house and they don't know what it is. But again, that's come a long way. We don't just do fires anymore. We are emergency services. We do it all.
Yeah. And what you just said makes me think, well, two things. There comes a time when being that short staffed is dangerous, right? You can't go to a large scale incident or a fire with 3 people and expect a good outcome. It's not safe for you. It's not safe for the people involved, the potential victims. And the other thing that you just mentioned was the shoe runs. That sounds like community outreach. Is community outreach a part of being a firefighter as well, on top of the medical and the fire aspect?
Absolutely. That's huge. Public relations, community outreach is huge. So, and that's not just Fire Prevention Week. We do that in October for the kids at the schools every year. We need to be out in the public all the time doing public education and educating adults and keeping that, reminder of, bad things happen and emergencies happen, and you have to know how to prepare for them and deal with them. So we're out there doing all different kinds of public relations. Obviously with this year in 2020 and then now in 2021, we may not be out on the street as much because of obviously everything going on. So I'm sure matter of fact, I can tell you this: in October of 2020, this was the first year that I know of in history that I've been there that we didn't do Fire Prevention Week. I mean, we look forward to that every year. You go out every year, and the kids love it. And it's a good time. And again, this year, some departments did a virtual fire prevention, which I thought was a good idea, really cool. And some maybe just couldn't do it because whatever it was, money, resources. That's not easy to do. Doing a Zoom, and you have 14 or 15 schools in your area, doing a Zoom for, how many 600 students per school is not easy. So this year was the first year we didn't do it. But for the most part, we do different kinds of public relations. We have to. You want to show the people what they're paying for. You want to show the people what resources are available to them. You want them to be comfortable. You want them to be safe.
Right. You don't, as much as you enjoy the firefighting aspect, you also want to partake in fire prevention, right? Because you want to minimize, the number of people affected by something like their house catching fire. And I the only reason that came to mind about the community outreach was not only what you said, but also I know in Philadelphia, if you call them because you need a fire alarm installed, I believe they'll come out and install a fire alarm for you and educate you on it.
Yeah, smoke detectors, and we'll install them. Most departments will provide them for you. We'll provide them for you if you need them. So, you brought up a good point with, being out in the public and, and making sure people know you're there and know who you are. That's key, because the public can actually help you. They're giving you information about different buildings and about different people in the area and anything going on in the neighborhood. So that actually helps you to plan.
It's a mutually beneficial relationship for sure. Now, what is I should say, what is your favorite part about being a firefighter or just working in the fire service in general? I know you had mentioned you work with education and teaching and rescue and EMS.
Yeah. I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of different things by choice. I chose to. But one of the things I still love is I still love going out and helping people, no matter what the call is. I know some people in this business hate going out to these, minor calls. I don't mind going out to any call. I really don't. It's just nature of the job. And like you had mentioned earlier about the fire prevention. Okay, let's be realistic. Every firefighter wants to go to a fire, but at the end of the day, our goal should be fire prevention, not hoping someone has a fire and potentially loses everything they own and worked for their whole life, or even worse, someone dies. So, we really should, your mindset has to change a little bit. But I still like going out to help people. One of the things I enjoy is, having staff companies matter, having people on shift, on duty matter. When you have a fire and you can contain it and keep it small, I always love that, knowing, you know what, we saved this building. This is minimal damage. What could have been a lot worse, because, we got there quickly and we were able to suppress the fire. So that's always something I like, when there was a small fire, maybe a dryer was on fire, the clothes were in the dryer caught fire, and we were able to keep it to the dryer and not the whole house burned down. That's a good feeling, knowing that you save that person's house, you save their property.
Absolutely. Now you've done, or I should say, you've worked in the fire service for 23, 24 years now. What are some of the bigger changes? I know you just mentioned there's a shift in mentality towards fire prevention. What are some big changes or improvements that you've seen over the last 2 decades?
There's definitely different standards out there. I think incident command has come a long way. We still have a long way to go. However, the incident command system is a big part of what we do, and having that structured supervision and span of control on incidents, that's huge. Equipment has changed, some for the better, some for the worse. It's like anything else. Everybody's got to make a living. So some of the equipment that is in the fire service, you can go to Home Depot and buy, but because somebody puts a stamp on it that says fire, they make a lot of money on it. And that's, you got to keep it simple in the fire and EMS service. And sometimes that doesn't happen.
There has to be standards, right? There has to be somebody overseeing your equipment and saying, okay, this is okay. This is okay for use. This will protect you. Is there not somebody like signing off on it, or?
It varies in the department. You have to think about this. You have a lot of, people that, unfortunately, in public safety, they don't know what they don't know, and they're scared to admit what they don't know, and they're scared to ask a question. So a lot of times, the people are buying equipment or purchasing something that's impractical, or just not for the best interest of the people on the street using it. Right. They don't do their homework, they don't do their research, and that's one of the biggest issues and challenges. It's like, oh, here's a new piece of equipment, go play with it. That's not official training. That's not, showing you anything.
No. The past, 20 odd years, have you seen strides being made in terms of safety and injury prevention and stuff like that? Because I know there's when it hits the news in Philadelphia that a firefighter died, there's usually a lot of media surrounding it, and then also a pretty serious investigation, from what I understand.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of different departments out there, OSHA and NIOSH and NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, and they set the standards and they do their investigations when there's an injury or, God forbid, a fatal. But there definitely has, in years, there's been a lot of changes when it comes to, firefighter cancer in the fire service, firefighter safety, firefighter PPE. There's a lot of different practices out there now that departments are doing. And again, it varies on what the budget is, how much money they have, what they can purchase for the members. Health and wellness is huge.
Right.
That's a whole other topic, but firefighter and EMS suicide is huge. There's a lot of different things out there that have to be thought about.
But they're actually addressing them now, which is kind of nice, is what it sounds like. They're at least acknowledging them or actively addressing them, which is kind of nice. That's a shift. Do you think this, do Do you think this is a result of, or do you think there has been a bigger push for these things post 9/11? That kind of seems like a large moment in history where practices shifted in firefighting because it was such a large scale event. And I know they did a lot of studies on the people that died afterwards, 10 years down the road, that passed away from all of the, toxic things that they inhaled while they were cleaning up afterwards for the weeks on end.
Still losing people, unfortunately. I think there was a lot of good changes after 9/11, and I think a lot of equipment and money and grants were given out. However, like anything else, it started to fade away.
Yeah.
Equipment that was purchased is no longer there. Grant money is no longer there. Politicians are forgetting and not worrying about it.
And that's a problem. Yeah, I've seen a lot of meetings on the healthcare and the benefits of those firefighters that were directly affected during the rescue effort.
The comedian Jon Stewart when he spoke with the officials for New York City,
he lights into them.
I mean, he's really a big supporter. But did you hear when he said, "I'll never forget this"? They did your job. Now you do yours.
Yes, and he was
they
in
were trying
tears.
to take away health care and benefits for these people. I mean, these guys have families. They ran in there and it's like, oh yeah, never mind. Now you're screwed. We're not gonna give you health care. I mean, that's a big challenge we deal with in fire and EMS.
Yeah, that was a moving moment for sure. He was moved to tears, and he, from what I understand, has been an activist for that cause for years. He constantly shows face and fights for the rights of the people that were directly affected by it. I don't want to dive too deep into that, but it made me think all of these shifts in safety and acknowledging, the issues at hand and improvements that need to be made, for the last 20 years. I feel like that was a pivotal moment and people started, taking things more seriously and, okay, what do we need to change here? What do we need to do? There was a lot of retrospective studies, I'm sure, as you know.
No doubt. Absolutely there was.
So 2020 was the worst, just top to bottom. What a terrible year. A lot of things changed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but there was a lot of good things that happened as well. But has COVID-19 affected your practice at all as a firefighter? Because you're essential. You still have to go out. You still have to protect yourself, and you still have to protect the people's homes you're in, even if it's a small incident, like you said, like putting out their dryer before it catches fire, something like that. Has it affected?
Good question, and I'll tell you where it affected us. All right, we'll start with PPE. One, it was retaining it, being able to get it, purchase it. From who, from where? Because, obviously the hospitals and healthcare needed it more than we did at the current time when it started. So that was a huge issue, is getting the PPE and, purchasing it and getting it delivered in a timely fashion. So the PPE was right off the bat. The second thing is a lot of departments, I can't speak for everyone, but I know mine and some neighboring ones I spoke with, we changed our responses. So you were told, hey, you're not going to certain calls. Well, at the end of the day, though, what's our primary goal is to help people in need. During COVID, this is their time of need.
Yeah.
This is when the whole world needed us. And, you're now saying you're not going to go to this call. We cut back on medical calls unless EMS requested us. Like if they needed obviously help, no doubt we have to go. We're going to go. But we wouldn't just go out the door. If someone's a block away and they might be unconscious, we would normally go to that in a heartbeat, but we were not going unless the ambulance called us.
So that pit crew CPR you were talking about, like somebody drops dead, that was another
Yeah. So for a while there, a lot of departments weren't doing CPR. they weren't working cardiac arrest. And again, in my personal opinion, I saw people firsthand that died that probably had somewhat of a chance, and that's scary to think about, that you couldn't help them. That you're sitting in a firehouse making, a good money and not responding to the call for help. That's why you're there.
Yeah.
Now turn it around. You go into someone's house for a gas leak or for an odor. Now you're wearing your mask. So now your senses are impaired, where normally we would use our senses to help us, complete the call. That was a big issue. Wearing the mask, policy development, because this is so new to everybody. The fire departments were all over the place with what do we implement and what do we not.
Yeah.
What do we do if a person has to quarantine? And obviously we followed CDC guidelines, but what do we do if this happens? And what happens if a whole platoon gets COVID? Now, if you have 6 firefighters that have COVID and they need to be quarantined for 14 days, that's a huge impact on the department.
Yeah.
Huge.
Massive.
A massive impact when you're out that many people for that much time.
And you're in close quarters. So, I mean, if one person drags it in asymptomatic, that's tough to avoid. And now, as you mentioned earlier, at a time when staffing's an issue everywhere and, there's always a need for more firefighters, that could knock out an entire, city or township's coverage. They got to wait for the next crew that doesn't have COVID to respond.
I mean, the added stress, just in general, along with everybody else out there, responding to calls wearing a mask is definitely different. And when when you have your safety glasses on and you're fogging up because of this mask, they're cumbersome. It's an annoyance for everybody.
Well, I
but
think
guess what? We have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sorry to cut you off, but I think your gear in general is not comfortable. I think about the SCBA, that mask that you guys wear on calls, and it blows my mind that you can just wear it comfortably or get used to it. But I guess it's definitely not cut out for everybody, and you probably eventually get used to it, I would imagine. But
it gets old after a while. It starts getting heavy, and you're just like, I'm over this. But, it's part of the job. It's part of the equipment. We're used to it.
Now, you don't have to mention numbers specifically if you don't want to, but you had mentioned volunteer firefighting earlier, and I think with the staffing issues that you also mentioned, I imagine people volunteering is down, and maybe there's more paid positions. Do you think? First off, are there more paid positions opening up? And second off, do you think that firefighters are being reimbursed well enough in this particular area? I know it varies everywhere, but do you think you guys are paid appropriately for what you do?
So two-part question there.
Sorry about that.
Answer.
That was pretty long.
So as far as the pay goes, do we all want more money? I think any human being is going to say they want more money. We always want more money for what we do. We do deal with a lot of things. We put our lives on the line, every day when we're going out to people's houses and car accidents. We're on highways operating on motor vehicle crashes with people doing 80 miles an hour past you. We're in, all different kinds of atmospheres. We work in all different kinds of weather. So the pay should be a lot more. As far as command staff goes, an officer, a captain, lieutenant, a battalion chief, they should be compensated. They have a lot of responsibility, more responsibility than most jobs have. They have a responsibility, number one, to ensure that 5 or 6 personnel underneath them get home safe to their family at the end of the day. That's the biggest responsibility. They have that responsibility to answer if something goes south, something goes wrong. What happened here? They have a ton of responsibility. Switch it over to the volunteer staffing. If you go to any firehouse, I think, in the country, you will see signs out front. Volunteers needed, volunteers wanted. You look on their Facebook pages, you will see volunteers needed, volunteers wanted.
Right.
Listen, I don't forget where I started. I was a volunteer, but the thing is, times have changed. And, I'm not at all trying to put down any volunteer, because what happens is there's always these battles with career and volunteer firefighters. And it's like the volunteers will say they forget where they started and they think they're better because they get a paycheck. They're the 2 top ones I hear all the time, which is not true at all. But at the end of the day, this is what puts food on my table. This is the job and career that I chose. I'm not degrading your job. Don't degrade mine. This is what provides for my family. This is what I choose to do. And I chose to make a life out of this. So, there's an issue because, the volunteerism now is just so hard. The training requirement, that's number one. Big commitment, huge. Number 2, the call volume and population growth is through the roof. Back in the day, you weren't getting the calls that you are today. Number 3, the roadways have changed. You can't get to firehouses quick. Back in the day, 15 years ago, you didn't have 10 red lights in a mile. Now every intersection has a red light. You can't get anywhere fast. That rapid response is key. Staffing matters, that rapid response. And listen, we always say staffing matters. We don't say paid staffing. Staffing. Volunteers should be staffing buildings, instead of coming from home. At-home responses should be a thing of the past.
Yes, I agree.
You're putting so many people and so many things at risk, including yourself. You should be in a building ready to respond to a call at a moment's notice.
Right. And in Philadelphia, there are only career firefighters, but I do know there are volunteer firefighters all around in surrounding suburbs and whatnot. If I can offer my opinion, it's that the job, now mind you, the disclaimer being I've never worked as a firefighter, but the job is or has been for too long relying on people, adrenaline junkies, wanting to join and volunteer their time for free because it's a fast and sexy job. But the truth is it's dangerous and it requires a lot of training, like you mentioned. And I think with that should come appropriate compensation. Obviously, if you're a teenager exploring career options, yes, volunteer. But I think if you're going all in and you're putting your life on the line, you need to be appropriately compensated for doing so.
I agree. And you need to have the benefits to back that up, and the healthcare and whatever other benefits are available to help you and supplement you.
Am I wrong? I feel like the only reason that these suburban communities still have volunteers is, the lineage that I previously mentioned aside, is they'll hook people in with the interest of having this like hardcore, really awesome, really cool, sexy job where you're doing crazy stuff all the time, and it's just like Chicago Fire. You know what I mean?
Total misconception.
Yeah.
It's funny because on the volunteer side, things have changed so drastic, and attitudes and personalities is what ruins the fire service and EMS and medical. And it's the same in the hospital. There's always attitudes and egos and whatnot.
Always egos.
But, the volunteer has to understand that, we're not trying to be better, or we're not trying to do away with you. But at the end of the day, I have to know my job. And I am cross-training multiple disciplines of the job, where a volunteer member can pick and choose when they want to respond, what training they want to go to.
Yeah.
I don't have that option. A volunteer member at any department can go, you know what? I need a little break. I need a little hiatus. I'm done for a couple of weeks because I'm just upset. I'm frustrated. I can't do that. If I do it, I'm using sick time, And another misconception too, a lot of volunteer members will say, we do it for free. We save the taxpayers money. Okay. Absolutely. You do. But where it's not true is no volunteer is free. You are still an employee of the town wherever you're at. They still have to provide for you some kind of medical coverage if you get hurt, disability. They still have to provide for you uniforms and training and, whatever else, physicals. That is not free.
Yeah.
You are not free. That's not, not true that volunteers don't cost anything. They absolutely do.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I don't know. It just like blew my mind thinking about that, because in my mind, I'm like, wait a second, there's no way I would do that job for free. And but I also, like I said, I've never been a firefighter, and I'm not knocking it at all, because I think that's a really noble thing to do. But I think the more logical way of working that angle is it should be treated like an internship, right? How many unpaid internships do you know of? You get in, you volunteer your time, you get your feet wet, you learn the job, you learn the ins and outs, you train up, and then you lock in that career spot. You know what I mean? Like,
and Sam, let me add two quick stories just on this topic. One is where I'm located. We have a lot of people from Philadelphia, where you're at, that moved over here, and we go there for one of them minor calls at their house. And when sometimes you tell them, like, we have volunteers at night or paid during the day or whatever the case may be, they go, "What's a volunteer?" Like, because they're from Philly, they expect a fire truck, and they don't know. Like, when they're like, "Wait, wow, what's a volunteer?"
Yeah.
They don't know. They're thinking they got coverage around the clock. And when you try to retain those people as volunteers, when the volunteers put out flyers and whatnot, they're like, "I'm not doing this. You're crazy. This is, no way. I'm not doing this for free." So you're not gonna retain someone from a big city or someone who lives in an urban area that moves over to a suburban area. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So that's definitely a challenge, to say the least. But we run into that quite a bit. The other thing you run into is some people think opposite. Some people think where the towns that have paid firefighters that they're all volunteer. They're like, these are paid firefighters, and it goes to show you how uneducated you are, where your tax dollars are going, and how much of a poor job we do educating the public.
Yeah.
So it's just a trickle down effect.
Two-sided.
It is. It's totally crazy. I sat on a panel on the State Union Association a couple of years ago, and it was just a discussion panel. It wasn't a debate. It was just an open forum, and it was really cool. I was very honored I got asked to do it, and I was up there with a battalion chief from Jersey City. Now, they're obviously fully paid, one of the oldest departments in history. I mean, great department, busy. Right. So when I was explaining where I'm from compared to where this battalion chief was from, she says, combination department. She goes, "What is that?" I said, "It's a mixture of paid and volunteer firefighters." She goes, "I wouldn't know where to start." She goes, I have 600 people under me. I wouldn't even know where to start. And what's a combination department? What is that?" And I explained it to her, and she's going, "That's a thing?" Like, she's from a big city. She had no idea. She's like, what, how does that work? Who's the supervisor? Who's this? I'm like, yeah, that's the challenge we face every day in a combination department. And they're all over the country.
And that's funny. She was so, not delusional, but just like, so just lost with that concept. And she's only, 2.5 hours north of you?
Yeah, you ain't getting, not even.
It's basically a neighbor. That's,
same state. She had no idea.
Crazy. That's crazy. So one of the things I like to do when specialists come on is I like to give them a chance to dispel any myths or misconceptions about firefighters. Is there anything you can think of that you want to mention? Any myths? I already went over the calendar shoot and the Chicago fire, and
definitely. All right, number one, the TV shows. If you watch them, don't believe probably 98% of what goes on and how it's done. Right. That's definitely the first thing right there. That's not true what happens. Number two, a lot of people stereotype us and they don't know the job. And, my theory is our door is always open, but a lot of people think firefighters don't do anything. EMTs don't do anything. Well, you know what? Listen, we do have a downtime job. There's no doubt about that. We are an insurance policy, basically. We are on the ready, and we are paid and trained for what we might have to do, not what we do, what we may have to do, a multitude of different emergencies that we're trained for. So, people think, all these firefighters do is sleep all day, and that's all they do. No, that's not true at all. We have a lot of duties. We have a lot of different duties we do: fire prevention, public education, fire inspection, fire investigation, equipment checks, fuel, you name it. The list goes on, cleaning, station duty, and training. So the myth, that's just a myth, that we, we do nothing all day.
Not to cut you off, but my tax dollars go towards the Philadelphia Fire Department. And I am completely comfortable with the old saying that I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
You're correct.
Right? So you're getting paid for what you might have to do. And that's perfectly said. That's so perfectly said. And that's important for people to know. You're not just dicking around at the station all day and cooking out on the grill or whatever.
I mean, listen, we're not a production job. Like, we're not on the assembly line at the Ford plant, or something. It's just not how it works in our job. And I hate to say it, Tim, but some people don't like that. They see that, man, these guys and girls get pretty good money to do really very little work. And they get kind of jealous, or it's not fair. Well, unfortunately, that's the nature of our job. But guess what? When I have to go to work on a 98-degree day on a third floor of an apartment building, guess what? I'm making my money. When I have to go cut someone out of a car on the side of the road when it's 10 degrees out, I could be out on a call for hours at a time.
Listen, a house right down the block from me caught on fire, and it took them, this was a 3-story row home down the block, and it took them hours, I think 6, 7, 8 hours to put out this house fire. It was so massive, and it was a feels like -5-degree day with the wind chill. So by the time they were done, everything was a sheet of ice. So not just, being caught in that building and sweating your ass off, but also doing that in the freezing cold weather is a really good point in this part of the country that seems particularly uncomfortable. But I also remember somebody going around lighting fires, just firebombing buildings. So it's not like you go and you do one big job. You might have to go to back to back to back to back. You know what I mean? And like you said, you're paid for what you might have to do. And I think that's really well worded.
Some towns go to a lot more fires than others, and where I'm located, we go to a lot more minor incidents than major fires. But I always say this: we do a pretty good job with our fire prevention. I credit it to that. That's again a misconception. I don't want to see someone's house burn to the ground. I don't want to see on Christmas Eve, which has happened in many towns across the country, on a holiday, their house burns to the ground the day before Christmas. I don't want to see that.
That's because of the Christmas lights, right? Yeah.
Well, it could be anything. But the point of it is, though, we're in the fire service to help people, but we shouldn't be begging for their houses to burn down.
Yeah.
Just think about that for a second. And a lot of people in the fire, business do that. They I want to go to a fire. I want to go to a fire. I get it. You want to use your training, sure. But guess what? They will come. It will come. Fires are not going anywhere. Yes, they're definitely decreasing because we're doing better with prevention and sprinkler systems and things like that. But they're not going anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah. You're not wishing harm on anybody. They're just eager to do their job, and I can understand that frustration. But you're right. The shift towards fire prevention is definitely huge, and I also think you summed it up really well as to how expansive the career is and how it intermingles with medicine and emergency medical services, and there's a lot of cross training.
We can always add to that sometime if you want to, Tim. Like, that would be awesome.
Yeah, for
if you want to ever do it like one day and speak more on the EMS end of it. But the whole point of it is fire and EMS are a team, and I despise it when I hear firefighters bashing EMS or talking about it, because I have friends that do it. And I may not say anything all the time to them because it might not be the time and place, but I hear it and I'm thinking, when one of your guys go down, what are you doing? Screaming for EMS. When one of your guys has a heart attack on shift, what are you doing? You're screaming for EMS. When you need, nobody wants to do medical because I think a lot of them are scared of it. I really do. It's the education, because I see it. I've seen, departments. I've worked a lot of EMS agencies, and I've seen it where firefighters are like timid when it's a sick patient. They're like shaking, like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, just relax, put them on some oxygen, set them up. They can't breathe. They just
the basics,
so timid man. On and it's the basics. That's training.
Yeah.
But we have to work together for the common goal, and that's the victim or the fire, or whatever the case is.
Absolutely.
If something goes south early on in a fire, with one of your people, we want EMS to take care of them, and we want them competent.
Absolutely. One of the other things that I like to do at the end of an episode is I like to allow the guests to offer any words of wisdom or any advice, anything that you want to pass on to people interested in becoming a firefighter or having a career in the fire services. I mean, you hit on like 9,000 things that they should definitely learn early. No, that's good.
I can keep spinning it out, but
that's good. But are there any So
I'll tell you this. The one thing is I mentioned about attitudes and egos. You need to check that at the door. I don't care how old you are. It's just, there's so many attitudes and egos now. Nobody's better than anybody else. We're all human beings. Nobody's God. Nobody's better than anybody else. We're all, human beings. So that's number one. Number two, eyes and ears open and mouth shut. Look around, ask questions, learn, absorb all that information like a sponge, pass it on, because you're not going to be there forever, just like I'm not. So that's why I like doing the teaching thing, a lot, because you pass on that information that was taught to you. I didn't just make it up. I was taught it by my mentors who I look up to and respect, and work with. They taught me things, and I'm teaching others things. Adapt and overcome. That's a big thing. You have to adapt to situations, to people, to it's a different kind of job. You're not going to the same place every day. Hit the streets, EMS or fire, medicine. Hit the streets. Know your target hazards. Know your high hazards. Know your buildings. Know your businesses. Listen, I'm as guilty as anybody else. Do I like sitting back a few minutes and checking out my phone and whatnot? Sure. But get off your phone and get up and go out and look around. Learn, right? And the last thing I'm going to tell you, read.
Yeah.
Reading is huge. Stop, flipping through Twitter and everything else. Read a book. And I'm not talking a fire or a medical book. Read different books about leadership and about, progressing yourself and being a better you. That's going to help you in the long run. And I would tell new people too, experience comes with time. And what else comes with time? Time. So, I see it all the time. These firefighters, EMTs come in and they're young and I've seen, I did this. No, you didn't. No, you absolutely didn't. You will. Yes, you will in 3 or 4 years and 5 years be able to say, I cut someone out of a car. I did this. You're not 9 months on and saying you did this and I did this and I saw this. No, you didn't. You're telling stories to your friends because you want to feel important. Experience comes with time.
Yeah.
If you're planning to do this for a career or for a while even, you are going to get that experience. You're going to get that time. So it's going to happen. It's going to come.
Anybody that's listening that was interested, they have, like I said, a million takeaways from this, not just from that last tidbit that you gave, but also the entire interview. So thank you very much for sharing all of that. I really appreciate you coming on. It was awesome to tie this all together and educate people, hopefully help educate people as to what firefighters do and how expansive and large their role is.
Yeah, no doubt. I appreciate you having me, Tim. It was a good time.
For sure. Thanks so much.
I enjoy the guitar too. That's pretty cool. I like the guitar at the beginning of the end.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you.